Right, so this video we are going to be looking at area and perimeter. That's our objective for the day. So our learning outcomes are to calculate the area and perimeter of rectangles, squares and compound shapes, to calculate the area of triangles, parallelograms and trapezia, and to solve area and perimeter problems that involve algebra. So to start off, we are going to look at rectangles. That is our first thing. So to work out the area of a rectangle, we multiply the base by the height. So this formula here says that A, area, equals base multiplied by the height. So the base is the measurement along here, along the bottom, and the height is the measurement going up the side here. So the formula looks like this: A equals B times H. And that will give you the area. So let's look at a rectangle that has some measurements on it. So here we've got a rectangle with a base of 4 centimeters and a height of 3 centimeters. So let's think about our formula. So if area equals base times height, here area equals base times height, the base along here 4 centimeters and the height up here 3 centimeters. So it would look like this: area equals 4, the base measurement, multiplied by 3, the height measurement. So 4 multiplied by 3 is 12. So we get the area equals 12 centimeters squared. Now that's really important because what we're doing is we're measuring in how many centimeter squares fit inside this shape. So now what we're going to do is look at a video which will give some more examples of this, show you some more examples with measurements, and then give you guys some questions to have a go at and see how you get on. So let's watch that video now.
This video is about finding the area of a rectangle. Whenever we look for area, whenever we're measuring area, we measure it in squares. So in this case, it's the units are centimeters. So we're going to measure it in centimeter squares. So how many 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter squares are going to fit in this shape? That's the question. So what's the area? How many squares fit into this shape? That's what they're asking us. So we've got 6 going down here and 5 along here. So if you can imagine the shape being in squares, you'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 centimeters on this side, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 centimeters along the bottom. So when we're looking for the area, how many squares are there? Well, there's 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 squares. So the area is 30 centimeters squared. 30 of the centimeter squares go into this shape. Now the quick way to work out the area of a rectangle is, so the area is the length times the width. So this side multiplied by this side. So 6 times 5, and that's 30 centimeters squared. So when we're working out the area of a rectangle, we need to do the length times the width. Okay, so let's look at these rectangles. This one here, you notice, is in meters. So instead of centimeter squares, we're going to measure this one in meter squares. It's the same kind of concept, but how many 1 meter by 1 meter squares fit into this shape? And the quick way is the length times the width. So we've got 2 times 10, so 2 times 10, and that's 20 meters squared. Here we've got a square. It's 9 times 9. 9 times 9, that's 81 centimeters squared this time. And this one's in millimeters, so we're going to measure it in millimeter squares. 7 times 10 is 70, and that's millimeters squared this time. Okay, pause the video and see if you can try these questions. Okay, so this one at the top, we've got 3 times 9. So remember, area of a rectangle is length times width. You could say base times height. but we'll say length times width. So 3 times 9, 27 meters squared. So the one down here, square, we've got 8 times 8 square, and 8 times 8 is 64, and that's centimeters squared. And here we've got 11 times 8. 11 times 8 is 88, and that's in millimeters squared.
Okay, so now we've looked at areas of rectangles, we're going to look at areas of triangles now. So, the area of a triangle is really similar to working out the area of a rectangle. You'll notice here that the blue shape here is our triangle. That's our triangle there. Now you'll notice that around it we've drawn a rectangle, and that the triangle is half of that rectangle. And if you look at all of these shapes, you'll see that any type of triangle is half the size of a rectangle. So, to work out the area of a triangle, we again do our base multiplied by our height, and then we divide it by 2. We half it. Because what we're doing is, when we multiply the base by the height, we're working out the area of this rectangle here. And then when we divide it by 2, we half it. We get rid of this side that we can't see, and we are just left with the area of this triangle. So the formula looks like this. Area equals base multiplied by height divided by 2. So let's again look at a triangle with some measurements. So here we've got a triangle with a base of 4 centimeters and a height of 5 centimeters. So again, we take our base, multiply by our height, and divide it by 2. So we get this. We get area equals 4 multiplied by 5 divided by 2. So 4 multiplied by 5 is 20. So now we have area equals 20 divided by 2. 20 divided by 2 is 10 centimeters. And then we get 10 centimeters squared because, again, we're counting how many squares that are 1 centimeter each fit inside this triangle. So again, we're going to look at another video, same as the rectangle one, with some more examples of areas of triangles and then some questions for you guys to try it yourselves.
In this video, we're looking at the area of a triangle. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pretend that this shape isn't a triangle at all. I'm going to pretend that it's a rectangle. So if I had a rectangle here, 9 by 10, remember the area of a rectangle is length times width. So area of rectangle is the length times the width. So if I wanted to work out the area of this whole shape, I'd do 9 times 10, which would be 90 centimeters squared. But I don't want the whole shape, and it's cut exactly down the middle. So I only want half of this shape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to half the 90, and that's going to give me my answer for the area of the triangle, which is half times the area of the rectangle. Half times 90, which would be 45 centimeters squared. So it'd be useful to have a formula for the area of a triangle. So what we're going to do is we're going to say the area of a triangle is half times the base times the height. Half times base times height. So what we can do is we can do half times 10 times 9. So in this case that would be half times 10 times 9. Half times 10 is 5. 5 times 9 is 45 centimeters squared again. So when we're working out the area of a triangle, we're going to do half times base times height. Okay, so let's look at the first one here. We've got the base is 3 and the height is 4. So we're going to use the formula half times base times height. So we've got half times 3 times 4. it doesn't matter what order you do multiplication in, but I'm just going to do it in the order that's there. It might not be the easiest way, but we'll just do it that way. So half of 3, that's 1.5, and 1.5 times 4, 1.5 fours, that's 6. So this is 6 meters squared. I think it would have been easier if we did 3 times 4 first and got 12 and then halved it. But yeah, because you can do this multiplication in any order. This one here is an interesting one. So when we say the height here, it's got to be what they call the perpendicular height. Perpendicular height. So that means it can't be slanted, it's got to be straight up, vertically up, straight up. So we're looking at this as the height, and this is the base. This tens here is just there to mislead us. We don't need it in the question. So half times base times height. So half times 12 times 8. In this case, I think half times 12 first, which is easier. So that's 6, and then 6 eighths. That's 48, and this is centimeters squared. Remember, the units when we're doing area is always in squares. We measure area in squares. And finally here, I've got 1 meter, and I've got 50 centimeters. Now they're in different units. We need to make the units the same before we do the question, because we've either got to measure it in centimeter squares, or we've got to measure it in meter squares. So if I wanted to measure it in centimeter squares, I'd change this to 100 centimeters. And then I'd do half times base, which is 50, times the height, which is 100. Half times 50 is 25. So now I've got 25 times 100, and 25 times 100 is 25, 2 zeros on the end. So 2,500 centimeters squared. I could have also done this question in meters, so I would have had to change this one to 0.5 meters. That would have given me half times half times 1. Half times a half. Half times a half is a quarter. Half of a half is a quarter. So that would be 0.25 times 1, which is 0.25 meters squared. Okay, here's some more questions. Try them. Pause the video now, give them a go, and I'll go through the answers after. Okay, so remember the formula, half times base times height. That's how we find the area of a triangle. So for this one, we're looking at the perpendicular height, remember. This one's slanty. We don't want this one. We want the perpendicular, the straight up height. So it's half times 6 times 8. Half times 6 is 3, and 3 eighths, 24. So 24 centimeters squared. This is the perpendicular height, so we've got half times the base, which is 10, times the height, which is 8. Half times 10 is 5, and 5 times 8 is 40, so 40 centimeters squared. And this one's in meters, but that doesn't make a difference, so half times base, which is 5, times the height, which is 10. In this case, I think it's easiest to times these first and then half it. So 5 times 10 is 50, and half of 50, that's 25 meters squared this time.
So, I hope that was of some help. You can message me or Stefania on Slack if you have any questions. But if you are happy with those, we can move on to the second video.